The recent Nvidia leak is absolutely insane. For those who haven't been following, Nvidia's GeForce Now had a massive database leak, exposing several unannounced titles, including titles that nobody was anticipating like Final Fantasy IX Remake, and even Chrono Cross Remastered. This is seemingly the biggest leak in video game history, and today Nvidia has confirmed that the list is in fact real. However, there's a caveat. They claim the unannounced titles on the list are purely speculative, which quite clearly is not true. But before we get into why, here's their official statement. With them saying, quote, Nvidia is aware of an unauthorized published game list, with both released and or speculative titles, used only for internal tracking and testing. Inclusion on the list is neither confirmation nor an announcement of any game. Nvidia took immediate action to remove access to the list. No confidential game builds or personal information were exposed. And here's the problem with that statement. Assuming that these are purely speculative titles, that is to say titles that they think will exist, then there is two specific questions that are raised. Certain Microsoft projects like Fable were using their internal code names for the project, something that Microsoft insiders later confirmed. If the list of games was purely speculative, how in the world would you know the internal code names for the projects? And even more obvious than that is the fact that who would be speculating on some of these titles existing? Like, no, literally, who the is speculating on Final Fantasy IX Remake like a day before this thing happened? Absolutely nobody. This seems more like the PR statement to cover their rear, rather than what actually happened. You ain't gotta be a mathematician to know that the math ain't math in here. I also think it was a bad move on their part to even confirm the legitimacy of the leak in the first place. I mean, without them explicitly confirming, anyone could have said that the leak was fake, that the person who exposed it was simply lying, and have basically let all the fans eat each other alive about it. But instead, they've chosen to confirm the list as real, and now they want you to believe that they were merely speculating that Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered was gonna happen. I mean, it was always a possibility, I guess, but no one was really speculating on it. So that means to me that even if you were telling the truth, and this all was just a big speculation on what you think is going to happen, then at some point you must have had some sort of inside info to even be able to speculate on some of these titles happening. So really, it just comes down to the fact that either Nvidia knew or Nvidia knew. In either case, things really do not look good for Nvidia right now. Now, I will say I think it's true that not all of these titles are definitely coming to PC. As again, GeForce Now isn't technically PC, it's a streaming service. And it's hard to imagine a title like Bayonetta 3 coming to PC. Then again, it's also hard to imagine Bayonetta 3, because that game is in development hell right now. But it does seem there is some legitimacy to the existence of most of the titles on here, which in itself is absolutely massive. While things are looking pretty good for us over the next few years, judging by these titles, only time will tell on the legitimacy of them. I mean, I imagine that a lot of titles on this list are 2, maybe even 3 years away. Of course, if the elephant in the room, Final Fantasy IX Remake, is real, that's the one I have the hardest time wrapping my head around. The two teams dedicated to creating high-end Final Fantasy content, that being Creative Business Unit 1 and Creative Business Unit 3, both being tied up in Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy XIV, and Final Fantasy XVI, it means that the two main Final Fantasy teams are not the ones working on this project. It could be an external company, but after what happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake and CyberConnect 2, and CyberConnect 2 basically having to be fired off of the remake project, it doesn't seem like Square Enix would do that again after being burned. At least not with a major Final Fantasy remake. And it would be pretty alarming for Sakaguchi to not be involved with this title in any way. But for now, this is all just speculation on what Nvidia claims is speculation. Subscribe, hit the bell icon, and let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Shout out to patron Celso O'Donnell and the rest of the Ultima community.